Good evening, America. This is 21st Century Radio's Dr. Bob Show on the American radio networks, reminding you that we're not just the people from any city or state in the Union, and we're not just the folks from the east or west coasts of America. We're not only Americans, Occidentals, or Orientals. We are people from the planet Earth. We are Earth people. Have you ever seen photographs of UFOs that appeared almost too good to be true? Well, we're going to discuss what might be the most documented UFO account ever. The Billy Meier case, or contact from the Pleiades. You will hear the actual recorded sounds of what the Pleiadians call their beam ships on your own radio. Dave Trepas will be our guest, and someone will win some actual photographs of the Pleiadian ships during our first hour. Well, welcome back to 21st Century Radio's Dr. Bob Show on the American radio networks. My executive producer is Laura Kortner. Rebecca Grossman is our assistant producer, and our engineer is Steve Dean. You can join us at 1-800-TALK-321. That's 1-800-825-5321. Remember, all 21st Century Radio Dr. Bob shows are recorded, and a catalog will be available in late November. If you want one, send a large self-addressed stamped envelope with 2 stamps to Dr. Bob, American Radio Networks, 1130 East Cold Spring Lane, Baltimore, Maryland, 21239. You know, every 3 weeks, we have a UFO update with Bob Exter. Last week, you heard Timothy Good, author of Above Top Secret, say that the Gulf Breeze, Florida sightings are the best documented UFO case to date. Well, I disagree. After the interview, I talked with Timothy Good. He had looked into the Billy Meier case. He said he believed Mr. Meier's 1964 contacts were solid, but he was unsure about the 1975 to 1976 material. He had not reviewed the case firsthand, and in the past decade, ever since the book UFO Contact from the Pleiades came out, I've asked many UFO researchers about this case. The majority said it was unproven and perhaps even a hoax. Well, I asked them, well, who proved that? And they gave me a vague, inconclusive answer. In fact, Bob Exter himself told me it was a hoax. But none of these researchers that I have seen, that have seen or studied this material firsthand. And I've always asked them why. Well, in 1985, I went public in my first lottery book and stated that it was the longest series of documented close encounters of the third kind ever recorded. I still believe this to be true, regardless of some who haven't even studied the case. And to my great delight, tonight, we will begin a series of interviews with Dave Trepas to examine this case in some detail. Well, welcome to 21st Century Radio, Dave.
Happy to be with you, Bob.
Well, Dave, who are you, and how did you become interested in the Billy Meier case?
Who am I?
Yeah,
good question.
That's the question.
Well, who I am is something of a generalist in background. I've done a number of things in my short lifespan of 35 years to date. Anything from communications satellites to being a writer. At the most recent, I would have called myself something of a science researcher, journalist, if you will. But I'm beginning to find myself in a position of having to call myself more of a scholar of extraterrestrial knowledge in preparation for things coming up. My background in terms of our subject at hand is one that is a convoluted story, which I'll reduce to about a 30-second spiel here.
All right.
Is that through a series of what I shall call coincidence, somewhat beyond my control, I was involved in a case involving something I believe you've had on your show once before called the Cydonia region on Mars, the Mars Project. And some of the data that was involved in these enigmatic objects on the surface of Mars reminded me of the Pleiades, which led me to a study of certain things that had occurred with the Pleiades. And through another convoluted series of coincidences, I was led to the American investigation team that was involved in what has become known today as the Billy Meier contact case out of Switzerland. And that essentially, of course, is where a fellow by the name of Edward Meier, who's an uneducated Swiss farmer, began a series of ongoing close encounters, apparently, with extraterrestrial beings from the star cluster we call the Pleiades.
Well, tell us a little bit about Billy Meier and when his first contacts with these aliens began.
Without confusing the story, his first contacts of the documented series of photos that we're discussing this afternoon and this evening actually began in the middle 70s, about 1975, January 28th. He actually had preparatory contacts with extraterrestrials long before that, as early as age 5 in his life. But that's another story in itself. He actually began in earnest with those we are referring to as Pleiadians in 1975, and those contacts continued sometimes 2 to 3 times a week face-to-face for a period of years up through about 1982, when the investigation team believes that they ended.
So it follows, this case follows a similar pattern that other contactees have had in the past, in that they were contacted very young.
Yes.
5 years old.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
All right. Now, in other words, Billy Meier has experienced such contacts for decades. Actually, before his contact with the Pleiadians.
Yes, essentially what occurred was at the age of 5, which was about 1942, during the war years in Germany, is when he actually had his first encounter with an individual who was identified as Pleiadian by the name of Spa. That's S as in Sam, F as in Frank, A-T-H is how you would spell it in our language. And that individual apparently was preparing Meier for things to come in his future. He spent about, 11 years in the cycle being trained in one way, shape, or form by this Spa on an educational level. And after that period of time, that gentleman died, apparently. And Meier was taken over by another young lady who was yet another extraterrestrial, known as Asket. Asket being not Pleiadian, but closely related to them. These are all human in appearance extraterrestrials. They look like us, essentially. And after an 11-year stint with her, he went on 11 years of not having any contact at all, up until the time of 1975, when his most overt contacts, when the photographs and the movies and the metal samples and everything that were given to him actually occurred.
Well, now, let's get to those first contacts. Who was it that he spoke with first?
He spoke with a young lady known as Semyazi. That would be spelled S as in Sam, A-S-E-M-A-J-S-E. With kind of a Nordic-sounding J. And Semyazi was a very good-looking blonde lady, apparently. By his appearances, he said she looked about 33. She says she was about 330.
Whoa.
by our terminology.
That's our terminology, right. Okay, so Semyazi spent many hours with Billy Meier and gave him some very valuable information as to the origins of Earth people. Now, could you summarize very briefly what humanity's roots are? That is, how were we really, according to these Pleiadians, created?
Well, actually, according to the Pleiadians, we have a common ancestry from a human standpoint. As the story goes from the Pleiadians, some 300,000 years ago, give or take, that they had actually colonized what we refer to as our Sol system here. There was indeed an indigenous population, which through one means or another, we'll call it genetic manipulation, had been altered somewhat, but also that they themselves had been, the Pleiadians, had been here. And over a period of history, in these 300,000 years, there have been a couple of very major wars that have gone on in which the Pleiadians had left again for one reason or another, and essentially come back thousands of years again to rediscover this place. And in that period of time, those who had stayed had somewhat regressed. And once again,
Dave, what kind of wars were they?
In what respect?
Were they fighting with spears and axes?
No, we're referring to high-tech wars. We're referring to wars with nuclear or high-energy destruction. Similar to what may be evidenced on Mars and some of the other old vitreous ruins that we find in, like, South America. Yes,
what Dave is referring to is, and we'll be talking with Brian O'Leary about this again in the coming month or so in his new book, but we've talked with Richard Hoagland and Greg Molinar about these faces and pyramids on Mars. So that's what Dave is referring to. Now, how does this type of evolution, how does it fit in with our Earth science type evolution or even creationism? Where are they in harmony?
I would have to say from a practical scientist point of view, probably not. But then there are so many things that practical scientists cannot explain because they are always looking for that fabled missing link. They're always looking for the fabled missing links in geology and other areas. and they always tend to gloss over those anomalous things that they find, such as these high-energy melted spots on planet Earth that are indistinguishable from modern-day high-energy beam weaponry, shall we say, what they would do. And that does not really jive with what they would like to believe. However, in terms of what perhaps many people who are more, shall we say, metaphysically inclined in their thinking or more spiritual in their thinking, they seem to feel that just like the ancient Hindus and Indian philosophies had ideas of ancient warfare, that actually occurred, so it does fit in with some of the other world philosophy.
All right, well, Dave, we're going to take a break here. This is 21st Century Radio's Dr. Bob Show on the American Radio Networks, where knowledge comes first. Don't go away. We'll be talking more with Dave Trepas about Billy Meier's contact with the Pleiadians after these few words from our sponsors. UFOs hanging out over there in the woods over there. A couple of dogs barking in the background. A couple of crickets there. Well, welcome back to 21st Century Radio's Dr. Bob Show on the American Radio Networks. Our contact number is 1-800-TALK-321. And listen carefully to this, folks. Our guest is Dave Trepas. And we're talking about Billy Meier's UFO contact with the Pleiadians. You remember that, and within about 10 or 12 minutes, you may win at least 10 photographs of these UFOs that we're talking about. They are certainly, in my opinion, the best photographs I have ever seen of a UFO, and I've looked at quite a few UFO photographs, or what looked like UFO photographs. And we're going to get to those, that sound that you hear in the background. I believe that is the... that's ship, that's 6. That's the spaceship, or number 6? Good old Variation 6, right, Dave?
Sounds like a Variation 6 beam ship, yes, sir.
Yes, just sounds like that way to me, too, out there, over there in the woods there. Now, what do Pleiadians say about other extraterrestrials? Do all other extraterrestrials have the same purpose in visiting our planet?
Apparently not. We're not even sure we know what the ulterior motives were of the Pleiadians themselves. The Pleiadians claim that at any given time there are about 8 different other extraterrestrial civilizations, if you will, who are visiting here, and that to date, as of the time that they had written the notes a few years back, with Meier, there had been over 108 different extraterrestrial civilizations that came here on a regular basis.
Did you say 108?
Yes, sir.
108 different no wonder they all don't look alike, right? I mean, let's face it, because, look, there are so many different descriptions that I've seen. From some ETs are 3.5 to 4.5 feet tall, and some are as large as 7 to 13-foot aliens, maybe even larger.
Yes.
Are the Pleiadians related to any of these beings?
The Pleiadians are human, as far as we are concerned. They are just like us, with just a small variation in the earlobes. They are primarily Nordic-looking. They are often referred to in ufological circles, and I don't really use the term UFO very much anymore because we know what these are. They're identified.
Yeah, you call them an IFO.
Yeah, absolutely. But they are referred to very often as the blondes because they look that way. The Pleiadians describe other humans, some of which are what we would call blacks today, some of which would be very much of Latin American looking, some of them that have very much the look of the ancient Maya. They describe many different races, such as that in the human category. They also do describe the very tall individuals, as you talked about. They also know of those known as Zeta Reticulans, who are the very small-looking fellows you see in the tabloids these days with the large amber-colored eyes. They do describe quite a few others that they're well aware of.
Well, there are quite a few, and of course we'll have Whitley Strieber back here and Bud Hopkins in the coming months to discuss their new book. As a matter of fact, Whitley Strieber has a movie coming out this November 20th, I believe, Dave. Well, I want to make sure we get enough popcorn and sit down and watch that one. According to the Pleiadians, what is the greatest problem our Earth is facing, and that could perhaps terminate humanity's existence on this planet?
Well, while their concerns were not primarily directed at saving us, because they say we have our own free will, they did relate to Meier one area that seemed to be very important to them, and this was originally reported to him back in the early 70s or mid-70s, and that did involve what we are now today seeing in the newspapers and on the news almost on a regular basis, and that is the ozone hole problem.
The old ozone depletion problem, eh, Dave?
Yes.
Yeah, we've talked about this problem, I think, for the last 2 years on 21st Century Radio. In our third hour tonight, we're going to get very deeply into the old ozone layer problem. You know, one of the things that really impressed me about these books, because, you know, folks, we're going to now get into some serious discussion on the photographs and the movies and why some folks seem to feel that these photographs, for some reason, aren't real. And some of them actually have said to me, these things look too good to be true, so I don't think they possibly could be, which is a very strange way of reacting to a photograph. Because you always hear, hey, let me take a look at a real good UFO photograph, and I'll tell you whether they exist. So you put them in their hands, and they say, that's too good to be true. Right, Dave?
That's about what happens.
That's exactly
They absolutely are so clear and so beautiful that they're almost eerie.
Oh, yes, they are eerie. Especially some of the ones with the beautiful, like, silver balls on top or whatever. They are absolutely gorgeous. There are a lot of other folks that criticize photographs of different types of UFOs by just saying, well, you know, there's a big problem and there being so many different kinds of them. Well, there are many different kinds of UFOs, friends. We're going to get into them in a few seconds. But we're going to pause here to let some of our stations identify themselves. And they are all identified now. Yes, sir. Well, friends, once again, I want to let you know that we are talking with Dave Trepas, and we're talking about the Billy Meier UFO contact with the Pleiades trick, or whatever you'd like to call it, something like that. It's especially fond of these books. Let me tell you, when you talk about large books, this one that I have here, I'm going to drop it on the table. Did you hear that, guys, out there across America? That must be a 3-pound book. That's 500 and some pages. These are some of the contact notes of the UFOs. These, after reading these notes, plus about 400 pages of other notes, I've come to the conclusion, especially after seeing the videos and the slides and all that kind of thing, that that indeed these are for real. The Billy Meier case is for real, and I hope that sometime in the future, the near future, we'll be able to convince MUFON to take another careful look at this, because I don't believe that they had enough information at hand to make the judgments that they had made in the past. As a matter of fact, let's get to those numerous photographs and movies that were taken by Billy Meier that give a great deal of credence to what he says. Please tell us how this one-armed farmer, you got to remember this, folks, here's a one-armed farmer with 2 cameras. One's a still camera, and the other is a motion picture, I think it's an 8 millimeter?
Yes.
Yeah. He goes out on his moped and photographs these. Tell us about the process that he goes through to do this. Will you please, Dave?
Well, essentially what would happen is Meier would receive a telepathic command that he would be going to have what he referred to as a contact, which numbered, you know, about 150 contacts over the period of time he was doing this. And just about the time he would be ready for that contact, occasionally his phone would ring in a very strange manner, or he would just get a cooling sensation across his forehead as an indication that they were ready for him. And he would meet with them in a series of ways. Normally, he would get on his moped and be mentally directed to drive sometimes 30, 40, 50 miles, or in his sense, kilometers, over hills and dales. He'd have to travel up into the forest, all in an effort to try and lose many times many of the observers of the military type who were constantly watching him. And he would literally set up, he'd bring a lunch with him, a hot thermos coffee, and he'd sit down and wait. And he would have his 35 millimeter camera, which he was able to operate with one hand. It was an old Olympus with kind of a thumb screw on it, so he could do it with one hand. The craft would appear for a few minutes, and he would be allowed to take literally posed shots of the craft hovering in place, moving, and at some of the instances they allowed him to take movie footage of these craft while he was also doing his 35 millimeter photography. He not only took photographs and movies of individual craft, but also sometimes up to 3 and 4 craft at a time.
Extraordinary.
Absolutely, and this is all seen on the movie footage, which is well available.
Well, guys, we're going to get into in just a little while the people that have studied these films and the conclusions they've come to, and you're going to be surprised, because it wasn't somebody down the road from Venezuela that said this stuff is good stuff. Some people that really know what they're talking about paid attention to the details. And it's very impressive stuff. As a matter of fact, it's so impressive when we get into the movies. tell you that the American Express card catalog now carries those videos. Did you know that, Dave?
Yes, they just did that just this last month. We just concluded that to release it because they believe this is real also.
Well, we're going to let some of our stations rejoin us right about here. Well, we're all back here. Friends, listen for the last time before we ask the big question. You know, of course, this is 21st Century Radio, and we are talking with Dave Trepas about Billy Meier's contact with the Pleiadians. Yep, remember that, because when we come back in a few minutes after one of our last breaks of the hour, we're going to ask the big question. The person who knows that information is going to win 10 photographs. You have never seen UFO photographs like this, friends. You never have. Nowhere in the world. Even I've seen the Gulf Breeze photographs, as I've been, of course, we've talked about the Gulf Breeze incident for the past 2 years on 21st Century Radio, but they can't compare to the kind of stuff that you're going to get absolutely free if you've got the correct information. Now, after seeing these photos, some researchers have said, obviously, that these things are about the best thing I've ever seen, and so therefore I'm going to doubt them, because they're going to doubt them for some reason. Tell us, who studied these photographs and films, and what conclusions did they come to, Dave?
Well, the films and the photographs have been looked at by a number of individuals. I have to digress for just a short moment and let your listening audience know that what actually occurred when Meier was taking these photographs over a period of years, many of them were being stolen, some of them were being lost, some of them were not being returned from the photographic labs he was having them developed at. In fact, he lost a great percentage of them that way. They went somewhere unbeknownst to anybody. But at a certain time when the investigators, which I always refer to as the American investigators, the Pleiadians were still talking with Meier while the investigators were on site. This was not an after-effect thing. Mm-hmm. The investigators were actually there when this was happening. And they actually had Meier give them a lot of the information that they wanted to come back to the North American continent to be researched properly. And that opened up a whole can of worms, because the investigators, who also happened to own what we will call an industrial counter-espionage company, primarily involved with computer crime and bugging of offices, intercorporate style, they were very much versed in that kind of technology. And they knew who to go to for all of the best investigation of not only the photographs, but the metal samples and the movies and everything else. Now, as part of this team, they had also invited a Japanese team headed by a man named Junichi Yaoi of Nippon Television, one of the world's better television corporations. And they also did their own independent investigation, primarily of the movie footage. And they themselves, as Nippon Television came out after they'd done their investigation and literally stated as a corporation they believed this to be real, that they could find no fakery whatsoever in any of the footage that they dealt with. Now, the still photos themselves were a little bit different story. Scientists of credibility, which some of them did see these and some of them did research these, also were the type of scientists and photo experts who are also involved in government projects that are funded through the government, and they are not able to disclose who they are.
Pardon us, Dave. We're going to take another break here. This is 21st Century Radio's Dr. Bob Show on the American Radio Networks, where knowledge comes first. Don't go away. We'll be talking more with Dave Trepas about the Billy Meier's contact with the Pleiadians after these few words from our sponsors. Welcome back to 21st Century Radio's Dr. Bob Show on the American Radio Networks. Our contact number is 1-800-TALK-321. That's 1-800-825-5321. And this is that moment in the hour in which we ask you, who are we talking with? And what is the name of the group of extraterrestrials that made contact with Billy Meier? You answer those two parts of the question, and you will win 10 photographs, beautiful photographs, of these Pleiadian ships. You're going to be amazed, friends. You really are going to be amazed. These are absolutely the best photographs I've ever seen, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But before we do that, there are some videos, right, Dave?
Absolutely, there are.
Let's talk a few seconds. I know we're going to get back to those photos because we talked already about Japan's Nippon TV taking a look at the film, and they said this stuff is fine, it works, we can't find anything wrong with it, but the photos were a different problem. We're going to get to those photos in just a minute, but I was so surprised, as I mentioned earlier, when I got my American Express little package, and there were, and on page 28 of their catalog, Dave, film clips of UFOs in the mid-1970s. Swiss farmer Edward Meier experienced and documented a series of contacts, etc., 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 and then it goes on to list 3 video cassettes that you can purchase called the Meier Chronicles, etc., etc.
Yeah, we referred to that as the Beam Ship Trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
And that does include 3 basic videos, about 3.5 hour of movie footage. And I think I should let your audience know this is daylight footage. This isn't blurry little things, and this isn't at night light.
That's right.
This is during the day. You're seeing it up close and personal.
Mm-hmm.
And the 3 tapes include what is known as Beam Ship, the movie footage, which is the Japanese-produced program which primarily investigates the movie footage itself.
Mm-hmm.
Extremely good.
Mm-hmm.
It takes you through the raw footage first, and then the second half of the tape shows you some of the investigation they did that convinced them that it was absolutely, positively real.
I don't see how it could possibly be hoaxed. I don't see how you can put 4 craft up in the air, film them, and do a little panorama on the side of the landscape.
Well, what did you think about the scene that showed the craft actually disappearing?
That was, Dave, that was one of the most mysterious things of all. All of a sudden, we were looking at this craft high up in the sky, and before you know it, within 1/20th of a second, is that correct, Dave?
Yes.
The thing disappears and comes back several hundred feet lower. I guess it would be several hundred feet lower in the viewfinder. It was an instantaneous type of thing. So obviously these craft can move, in my opinion, interdimensionally. Is that true, Dave?
That is what they describe as it being interdimensional travel.
Mm-hmm.
And in the movie footage, where there have been no cuts or alterations whatsoever, you can actually see, as you were describing, in one frame of the film, where the craft is dematerializing at the top of the frame, and at the same instant, in the same frame of the movie film, is rematerializing in the bottom part of the frame.
Now, you mentioned that, friends, we've had a lot of callers, and I think we have a winner. Yes, we do. We'll get to that winner. We're going to bring him online in just a minute. But before that, because our time is running out, Dave, and there's a lot of other questions I want to get to, and fortunately, in a couple of months, we're going to have you back, and then a couple of months later, we'll have you back a third and perhaps a fourth time, because there's so much to discuss in this particular area, especially about the message. And wait, I'll tell you what, friends, let's go to Rick in Reno right away, and ask Brother Rick.
Yes, Dr. Bob.
Yes, Rick, who are we speaking with right now?
It's Mr. Dave Trepas.
And what case are we talking about?
We're talking about the Pleiadians and their giving of information to Mr. Billy Meier or Edward Meier.
Congratulations, you are the winner of 10 beautiful photographs of these Pleiadian spacecraft.
Looking forward to examining them.
Oh, Rick, you are gonna really. You should invite your entire family over to take a look at these, because you will never see anything like this. And I've been paying attention to this particular area for over 20-some years. I've never seen anything like it.
Listen, Dr. Bob, I wanted to register a complaint with you, if I may.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
You used to have the UFO report with a ufologist, an expert, every other week, and now you've gone to every 3 weeks. I wish you'd go back to having it every 2 weeks.
I'll take that in consideration.
Okay.
Okay? Certainly, because I know how important UFOs are, enormously important. As you might have heard last week, we read the New York Times analysis of the USSR. Did I give it 3 S's there? Yes, I did. And in that report, the New York Times says they believe it could be the story of the century.
I'll be done. Now, do you have Mr. Trepas on the line?
Yes,
still?
we do. You want to ask him a question, Rick?
Yeah, I wanted to ask him his thoughts on the TASS report out of the USSR. It sounds very bogus to me.
Well, actually, I have a few different sources of information than most folks in these areas, and the descriptions that were made of the encounter itself match some other cases that have occurred around the world almost exactly. Very similar symbols had been seen, very similar occupants of the vehicles, very, very similar, and we have no reason to doubt what's going on. What we did find interesting, and the reason that this did make the news, is because one of the more repressive societies in the world is actually about the first one to actually, on a semi-official basis, release such information. That we found extremely interesting. But I find it to be very believable, primarily because of the background that I have in seeing other cases with virtually identical descriptions.
Mm-hmm. Well, Rick, we're going to have to move on because we only have around 8 or 9 minutes left. Thank you for calling, and congratulations, Rick. You're going to love these photographs. All right. Now, he's gone Venezuela there. You still with us, Dave?
I'm still here.
All right, Dave. Now, you mentioned something about a special offer on a videotape.
Yes, because everything we do is essentially on a not a not-for-profit basis, because we had made a promise to Billy and the Pleiadians to release all the information in as pure a form as we can without any alteration of the truth. And we have done that. And essentially on these videotapes, the trilogy itself, the 3 tapes, which is about 3.5 hours worth of filming, is running $99. Now, because that's a lot of money for some people, although that's very cheap for what you're seeing here, is that there is one film in particular, the one called The Movie Footage, Beam Ship the Movie Footage, for all those listeners of your program when they call in or write into us and tell us that they heard about this on your show, the Dr. Bob Show. We're going to allow them to purchase that one at a little bit of a loss to us, which is $39, and that includes the postage.
Terrific.
Now, they will, in addition to that, they will get a coupon with it that if they are convinced that this is as good as you're talking about, they can get the other 2 videos to complete their set for just the $99, and that's postage included. And that coupon will have to come back so that we know it's them.
Well, great. Okay, friends, now let's find out how we can contact you there, Dave. Where do they write?
They can write to the College of Knowledge, which is me, at 9005 North Hazeldine, that's Hazeldine Road, in the city of Casa Grande, that's C-A-S-A Grande, Arizona. Our zip code is 85222. Now, they're also welcome to call me, and they can call for general information to area code 602-836-5637. That'll ring my office direct. Now, if they just want to place an order, now that's all this is for. We've made it convenient for people. If they want to do a credit card or something, and we're not, like I said, we're not doing this for profit, but they can call 1-800-426-3555, and they can place an order there if they're just in a great big hurry. There will be a small additional charge if they call that number, because those people charge me $2 each time someone calls. So I prefer that you write or call me on that other number.
All right, friends, call at 602-836-5637, the College of Knowledge, 9005 North Hazeldine Road, Casa Grande. What a name, Casa Grande. Boy, Casa Grande, Arizona, 85222. All right, we have maybe about 6 minutes left. We have a final break in about a minute. And I'm going to, when we come back, Dave, I'm going to ask you some very fast questions, about 6 or 7. And we're going to get them in, believe it or not, within 3 or 4 minutes, because we can do it, because I know you've had some experience in this before, right, Dave?
Absolutely.
All right. Now, the thing that I'm going to come to immediately is, why have some UFO researchers concluded that these photos are hoaxed? Friends, you're going to be surprised about what you hear. You want to take some notes on this. And remember, once again, that phone number is 602-836-5637. All right, this is 21st Century Radio's Dr. Bob Show on the American Radio Networks, where knowledge comes first. We'll be back in just a few minutes with Dave Trepas and Billy Meier's contact with the Pleiadians. Hey, welcome back to 21st Century Radio's Dr. Bob Show on the American Radio Networks. Our contact number is 1-800-TALK-321, and our guest has been Dave Trepas, and we've been talking about Billy Meier's UFO contact with the Pleiadians. In the background, is that still number 6? I hope soon we'll get the number 3. Will we play the number 3 before we get off the air? hope we have time. All right, Dave, we're going to go real quick here with some very important questions.
Yeah.
Why have some UFO researchers concluded that these photos are hoaxed?
Because they have not looked at the original data. Many of them haven't even read the books or seen the films.
All right. Now, as I recall, Billy Meier had a photo album.
Yes. Now, that was one of the contentions a lot of them made, is they said that Meier took photos of models. And, in fact, Meier had literally hundreds of photos and all kinds of photos in these albums that he would show to anybody who came to his place so they could see what was happening. And amongst these photos were some photos of models. These were not very good. They were turned on a lathe. They were wood. In fact, we published photos of these back in 1978, I believe, was the first time it was done. And there were some so-called UFO researchers from Europe, or people who purported to be so, who really didn't know what they were looking for. They'd show up at the Meier farm, try to get to see Billy. Some of the people who were around Billy would show them these albums, and literally while their backs were turned, these so-called researchers or journalists would help themselves to some of the photos out of his album.
In other words, they stole them.
Yes.
And
then they took those photos and they sent them to their favorite UFO research labs, some of them here in the United States. And unfortunately, what they did was they sent model photos.
Yeah.
And so if you actually have a photo of a model and you research it to find out if it's a model, and you find out that it's a model, what have you proved? That it's a model. And that's exactly what they did, and they did not look at any of the photos that were real.
Yep, well, there's the problem right there. That's the hole I found myself in many times in talking with folks, because they were talking about stuff that they really hadn't researched too well. And the models' photos were stolen. They were supposed to be studied as being examples of alleged real UFOs, and of course they were photos of models.
Yes.
And so therefore, of course, they were going to be models.
Yes, actually, those were used as control. Our own investigation group spent $400 on a very good model, took photos of it in all the same positions that Meier did. And while they looked pretty good, we were able to pick out every single one of the models with computer enhancement, which was not possible with Meier's photos.
And that's what I wanted to point out, friends. This has really been carefully looked into on many different levels. Now, those who saw the September 18th, 1989 edition of Time magazine on page 50, there was an article entitled "Around and Around in Circles," were aware of these circular patterns occurring throughout England, in England's farmland. What kind of patterns do these Pleiadian beam ships leave behind?
They're virtually identical.
Yes, they are.
They're swirled counterclockwise, grassy-looking circles.
They're exactly the same, friends, that I've seen.
Yeah, I might mention, Bob, not to interrupt you, but before we get off, I hope you'll let them know that they'll send me a self-addressed stamped envelope and $1. I'll send them one of those full-color photos so they know what we're talking about.
Excellent. Let's go back over that address and phone number again. Friends, if you want to get one of those photographs for $1, just write Brother Dave Trepas, but you don't have to call him Brother Dave. I'll call him Brother Dave. College of Knowledge, 9005 North Hazeldine, Hazeldine Road, Casa Grande, Arizona, 85222. That's 3 2s. You can call them at 602-836-5637. Okay, now we've got that certainly. Now, if we've got, we only got 25 seconds. Well, we're not going to have time. Dave, I want to thank you very much for coming on board our UFO tonight. We'll be back with you in a couple of months because I want to get into the UFO contactee notes and discuss them in some detail, okay? Dave? All right. We'll see you folks in, in just about 4 minutes.